Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jo Davich with the Georgia Center for the Book. And again, welcome to Revival Lost Southern Voices. A few notes before we begin our presentation this afternoon. If you would like to ask a question of any of our panelists after the formal presentation, you may do so by using the Q&A feature. You can find the Q&A button at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on your device. If you click on the icon, you can then type in your question and we'll answer it in turn. Also, in the chat, we've provided links to local bookstores who will be providing some of the books that we will discuss today in our panel session. Our independent bookseller today is Acapella Books in Little 5 Points. If you like this session and would like to rewatch it or watch any of the sessions you might have missed earlier, we will be posting these to our YouTube channel for the Georgia Center for the Book. Also, as a reminder, if you would like to participate in the raffle, please make sure your first and last name are entered either in the chat above so we can recognize you, or please type your name in the chat below. We'll make one last call before we wrap up the panel just to make sure all participants are able to do so. I would also like to take a moment to remind you that we have 2 additional panels tomorrow. At 1 p.m., Tina McRoy-Ansa will be talking about John Oliver Killens. And at 4 p.m., we will present a panel on the Orly airfield tragedy, the day that Atlanta stood still. Once again, I would like to take this moment on behalf of Georgia Community College, Georgia State University, and the Georgia Center for the Book to welcome you all to Revival Lost Southern Voices 2022. And now I would like to introduce Beverly Guy-Sheftall, the founding director of the Women's Research and Resource Center and the Anna Julia Cooper Professor of Women's Studies at Spelman College. She attended Spelman College, Wesley College, and received a master's degree in English in Atlanta. She was a visiting professor at Emory University's Institute for Women's Studies and taught at Alabama State University before coming to Spelman. She has published a number of texts with African American and women's studies, which have been noted as seminal works by other scholars, including the first anthology on Black women's literature, Sturdy Black Bridges, Visions of Black Women in Literature, which was co-edited by Roseanne P. Bell and Betty Parker Smith. She is the past president of the National Women's Studies Association and was recently elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Once again, welcome to Revival Lost Southern Voices, and please welcome Beverly Guy-Sheftall. Beverly? Ooh, Beverly, you're still on mute.
Thanks very much, Jo, for that too long introduction. Our panel is very happy to be a part of Lost Revival. And I want to begin on behalf of myself and our panelists to remember Valerie Boyd, a very close friend and colleague, the author of the now canonical biography of Zora Neale Hurston, Wrapped in Rainbows. And I also want to just share with the audience that the much awaited for journals of Alice Walker entitled Gathering Blossoms Under Fire is actually being released next week in April. Valerie edited those journals. Alice is very sad, of course, that Valerie will be unable to accompany her as she promotes the book. But some of us will be stepping in. So we want to remember Valerie. She is the one who organized this panel and would have been moderating this panel if she hadn't left us in February after a valiant and long battle with cancer. I only want to say a few little things about myself before I introduce our esteemed panelists. And I want to say I cannot think of any 2 persons who would have been better to talk about the life and times of Toni Cade Bambara than Linda Holmes and Louis Massiah. And we decided for this panel to talk, broadly speaking, about the life and times of Toni Cade Bambara rather than her Atlanta days. And we took that prerogative. I want to just say that I was deeply impacted by Toni Cade Bambara's 1970s book, The Black Woman, like many budding Black feminists of that generation. And I would say unequivocally that were it not for Toni Cade Bambara, I would not have become the outspoken, unapologetic Black feminist person that I became, where I spent most of my career at Spelman College. And I'm going to say a little bit at the end of our formal presentation about the more than 16-year annual project that the Women's Center at Spelman puts on to honor the life and legacy of Toni Cade Bambara. And I think that we probably are the only academic institution that honors on a yearly basis a writer, scholar, activist, organizer, cultural worker of the legendary Toni Cade Bambara. And Linda and Louis have joined us on many occasions, as have Toni Cade Bambara's daughter and granddaughter. So I feel deeply connected to Toni Cade as a person and also to her work. So I want to briefly introduce Linda Holmes. She is a writer, an independent scholar, a longtime women's health activist, and that was a context in which, Linda, we met as board members of the National Black Women's Health Project. She has done pioneering work, oral histories of African-American midwives, and in fact had a very important African-American midwifery conference at Spelman College, the Women's Center. I don't remember what year that was. You might refer to that. She has also been a research scientist for the New Jersey Department of Public Health, a board member of the National Black Women's Health Project, as I mentioned, and of course, very known for her scholarly work on African-American midwifery. She is now, luckily, and I wish I could say the same, retired and living in Hampton, Virginia. She also, in addition to writing the biography of Toni Cade Bambara, which she's going to talk about, also is co-editor with Cheryl Wall, who also unfortunately left us, of Savoring the Salt, the Legacy of Toni Cade Bambara, which was published in 2007. So I will, we'll hear from Linda, then I will introduce Louis before his presentation. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much, Beverly. It's always wonderful when a friend provides an introduction and does it in such a way that it covers the intersections of my life in terms of the midwifery work, working with the center there in Atlanta in terms of celebrating Toni Cade Bambara, as well as linking me to Atlanta, which I'll be talking about. I will not focus specifically on the Atlanta years because I don't think you can bound Toni to any particular place or space, but I will be focusing on the years that Toni lived in Atlanta and some of the explorations and her going beyond the boundaries geographically while she's in Atlanta. And those years in Atlanta actually begin in 1974 and continue for a decade. And before I go into the presentation, I just want to join you in terms of the special moment in the context of this particular panel in thinking about Valerie and in thinking about Toni. When I was first asked to be on the panel, I was a little hesitant about it. I had done this research several years ago. I'm now really deeply buried in my midwifery work. But Valerie was the one that was extending the invitation. And the last time I saw Valerie was actually at a conference honoring and welcoming Toni Cade Bambara into the Georgia Writer Hall of Fame. And we had a chance to celebrate Toni there. And so I was, I couldn't imagine really actually saying no to Valerie about anything. And the other reason that I found it impossible to say no is because today is Toni Cade Bambara's birthday. She would be 85 years old today. And so 85, 83. So the stars, the signs made it impossible to say no. So I'm going to jump into my conversation kind of kicking off this panel, and with the first slide, please. So I met Toni Cade Bambara as a student of Toni Cade Bambara at Livingston College at Rutgers. And before knowing Toni Cade Bambara, I had never been to Atlanta. And so it was quite amazing to be ushered into Toni's world in Atlanta, which connects in many ways to places that she visited while she was in Atlanta, from Vietnam to the working with rural farmers to doing all kinds of things that I never would have imagined Toni doing when I first met Toni, which was at Livingston College in Piscataway, New Jersey. Next slide, please. The next slide. So when I met Toni, the one before that is fine, the two books with Gorilla My Love. When I met Toni, Livingston College had just opened up, and this is in their summer program, 1969, 1970. I was a teenager. I was, 19 years old. I was very involved with the Black student movement that was going on at Livingston and across the country. This was a few years after, of course, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and rebellion is what we were all about, both against the war that was going on in Vietnam in the years earlier. And when Livingston College opened up in 1970 as somewhat of a response to the demands for more Black teachers, for more courses focusing on topics beyond the Western cultural model that really feeds the notion, I must say, of white supremacy. So our demands were partially answered by Rutgers University deciding to open up this new campus called Livingston College. Toni Cade Bambara previously had been teaching at City College at SEEK, and had really fostered and developed this idea about what does it mean to create a Black university space within a white, predominantly historically white university space. And she brings these ideas from SEEK to Livingston College, which is where I met her. And when she brings these ideas to SEEK, she starts with actually heading the summer program. And the word was, if you're going to take a class at Livingston, be sure to take a class with Toni Cade, as we knew her at that time. Now, Nikki Giovanni was at Livingston at that point. Sonia Sanchez was later there teaching. There was a cadre of revolutionary thinkers and writers, and there was a great deal of excitement. But when I walked into Toni Cade's class for the first time, I did not know that she was a Black writer. I had not read The Black Woman. I had not read Gorilla My Love. And Toni did not introduce herself as a writer who had been recognized in reviews in the New York Times, and was a part of this groundbreaking group of Black writers that included Toni Morrison, Paula Marshall, and a host of others. Toni walks in as a teacher who is committed to moving us beyond writing the theses and the essays, and really doing work that we can take back to the community. And when I did the book on Savoring the Salt, I learned for the first time that the chairperson of the English department who hired Toni Cade Bambara also was not aware of Gorilla My Love and The Black Woman, but saw Toni Cade Bambara as this very successful professor who we all called Toni. And that's why he brings her to Livingston. The next slide. Then, so Toni Cade Bambara, who I actually met in 1970 and remained in contact with for the next 4 decades, the one idea that has always stuck with me, and I'm going to kind of use this to hold this. There's so much to talk about when talking about Toni, but this idea of organize where you are, right? Whether you're in Atlanta, whether you're in Vietnam, whether you're working with farm workers, but this idea of Toni as a really grassroots community-based worker really came alive for me on the campus, but very much so when I came to Atlanta to visit Toni for the first time. Several of the faculty at Atlanta and at Livingston College, including Jan Douglas, Pat Daly, the Institute of the Black World was opening up, actually are coming to Atlanta. And Atlanta is seen at that point as a hotspot for cultural activism. The next slide. Just briefly, this idea of Toni's Organize Where You Are. This is Tales and Stories for Black Folks, was a book that was in print, I think, for possibly maybe 1 or 2 years. It includes writings from some of the students in her class, including myself. My story is The True Story of Chicken Licken, where she was telling us to rewrite these children's stories so that they have meaning for Black children. So in my story, it's that it wasn't the sky falling that hit Chicken Licken on the head. It was a policeman with his bat and so forth, and they organized this protest and a march. But this image is here now because when Toni comes to Atlanta, she's a mom. Her daughter is young, preschool age, and she gets involved with the Martin Luther King, an independent Black school, right? And so she's not just there dropping off Karma, her daughter, but she's very much involved with building the curriculum, books to bring into the school, this idea of organizing wherever she is. The next slide. This is one of my favorites, Beverly. Toni Cade Bambara.
Goodness, that's wonderful.
With Toni Morrison, who was Toni Cade's editor for all of her books, except for her first book, The Black Woman, but from there on, and was responsible for bringing into the light of day her unfinished work, Those Bones Are Not My Child. But here, this is when Toni is first coming to Atlanta and making just, one of the places where she begins to do her work, to do her Toni stuff is at Spelman College where she's teaching. But what I see in this picture is Toni, with her hands talking to the president of Spelman and his wife, but more than likely she's got an agenda in her mind. Like one of the things that she wanted to do was make sure that classes at Spelman were at night so that people who were in the community, like, postal workers and other community folk could actually come to the Spelman class and audit it. So no telling what was going on there, but that animated, idea of Toni is always present. The next slide. And this is another example, and I'll just mention this again to Beverly because Beverly's images of Black women is in the table of contents. This is 1975, and Toni again is seeing print as a way to vitalize movement, to vitalize cultural work. So Southern Exposure, she and Leah Wise, who just returned from China, organized a special edition of Southern Exposure called Southern Black Utterances. And I could only imagine how exciting it would have been if this could have been a journal that continued beyond its first when it hits the streets here. But you can see from the titles, you can see from it's very Toni in terms of poetry, artists, activists, international in the table of contents. Next slide. When I was working on the biography, A Joyous Revolt, I spent a lot of time at Spelman. Toni's daughter, Karma, donated Toni's papers and artifacts, which are quite a treasure to Spelman. And I was not aware before doing the work that I did at Spelman that Toni had actually gone to Vietnam as part of a feminist women's group. And again, Toni is one of the ideas that she talks about a lot is her womanist work, her feminist work, but also this idea of the collective, right? One of the things that she talks about also is connecting her womanist work with her Pan-African work, with her cultural work, with her socialist work. And so here in this image, these are very radical activists, feminist women who go to Vietnam, and they carry with them medical supplies that they take to a hospital. And they're also having meetings with women in Vietnam. And Toni Cade Bambara is the kind of the informal chairperson of the group when they're doing this work. And when she comes back, she makes sure to have a seminar, a conversation on campus at Atlanta University to talk about the women who she met, who she talked about as reminding her of her grandmother. Again, making this kind of international sisterhood bond. The next slide. The next slide, please. The wooden. The next slide, which I think will come up shortly, is we're talking about Toni in organizing spaces in schools and in independent Black schools, whether it's where her daughter's going to preschool, whether it's in the park, outdoor spaces, on campuses. But Toni's house also had a special open door to poetry readings, to gatherings, to folks coming from. I had a friend who lived in Selma, Alabama, which is about an hour and a half away, and Toni had a Sunday afternoon workshop that she attended. So it's incredible that Toni, this published author and recognized woman, is now opening up her doors on Sundays. And so it was worth her time for her to take the break from her civil rights work as a lawyer in Selma to be a part of this writing group on this at Toni's space, which was this incredible house on the hill, as I see it. This is a picture that I took very recently because whenever I am in Atlanta, I try to take time to drive by Simpson Street because of the memories that I also have there. The next slide. This is, when I was thinking about this presentation, this is Toni outside in her yard. In the book, A Joyous Revolt, I talk about the fact that Toni often had to really center and focus and to create that writing space, right? Because she's so involved in community and so involved with making the interconnections and so involved with the open door. But she does talk about having, before writing The Salt Eaters, which she did write in Atlanta, that she goes into this backyard space and uses it as a meditation space to move forward the writing. And when I sent this photo to Karma this week, Karma said that she thinks that that might be her mom standing out in the backyard, which Toni said some people referred to as her woods, but was also her space for meditation, her space for garden, where they had a celebration, an outdoor celebration of for the Salt Eaters after it was published. The next slide. I love this itinerary, which I did not come across until recently, or actually when I was thinking about this presentation. Toni, the Atlanta years and beyond, right? No geographic boundaries. So I was working, as Beverly mentioned, with a midwife program in New Jersey, and kind of a lesson, a Toni Cade Bambara lesson about organize where you are, involve the community. So a lot of complaints about the care and the disparities and the lack of equity, which is persistent today. But we organized a community group to make some demands about making some changes, which led to more midwives and a birthing room space. And we were trying to think of who could possibly be the speaker. And so I said, well, maybe Toni Cade Bambara. And of course, Toni Cade Bambara did not charge. Toni Cade Bambara came with, we ordered some of her books, and she asked for some transportation, and that was all she asked for. But when I was looking at her itinerary, which may be hard to see, but it starts with being at a hotel in New York, where she's getting probably arranged by Random House because she's having this meeting with Toni Morrison, her editor. And then the next day, I think, I actually can't see this, but on this itinerary is also her time at the birth room, right? Where she's talking about community links, creating circles, breaking down this hierarchy of, the doctor on top, the midwife, and then the nurse, but the collective sense that she's bringing to this opening of the birth room. And then from there, she goes, this is all in one day, she goes to Livingston College, where Pepsi Charles, who was also at Livingston College, to have a conversation with students there. And then in the same day, and again, I'm recalling this without being able to actually see the print at this point, but from there, she goes to the prison to do one of her prison workshops, right? And in the book, I do talk a lot about the work that she did in women's prisons and writing workshops. And so again, certainly living in Atlanta, but Atlanta and beyond. The next slide. And this one is also an example of Toni's involvement in with the Black farmers workers movement, and also actually being involved with a women's coalition in Eppes, Alabama, which had been women involved as really changing the world as civil rights workers. And so Toni takes time out to be a part of a conference and to talk about women's health issues while she's there. While she's in Atlanta, she's also doing what she always does, which she's making herself present for campus engagement and teaching here and there for a semester. And so it's important to recognize at this writers' conference that at the same time, Toni is writing, and she's bringing, I talked about her first book, The Black Woman, then Gorilla, My Love. So The Seabirds Are Still Alive is written in Atlanta. And that includes a beautiful short story about her time reflecting her experience in Vietnam. And then we have the groundbreaking Salt Eaters, which we could spend a week exploring among writers. And that's another one of her Toni Cade Bambara works that are based during that 10 years. And then, of course, she begins the work on Those Bones Are Not My Child. And that work, the first time that I heard Toni read from the journal entry, which is the beginning of her writing of that book, which stems from the experience of living in Atlanta at that time, having a daughter in Atlanta at that time, and being a part of the Black community and connecting with the Black community in so many different ways. Toni would say the laundromat was one of my favorite places to organize. But I first heard Toni read from that introduction, which I'm hoping that many of you, if you don't know the whole book, you need to read the book, but many of you who have lived in Atlanta or who were around at that time know this, Toni telling the story of not knowing where her own daughter was, right? And in this time of terror and terrorism. And so the reason, I'm speculating now that the reason that the book took so long to write is because Toni was so much involved with the activism and the work that was going on around the terror that was in Atlanta at the time. And just talking about it, it's bringing a lot back. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So the two things I found that like this, like a couple of days ago, was the itinerary for the work that she did, that 2 days in New Jersey, New York, meeting with the editor, meeting with prisoners, dedicating a birth room, going to a college campus. And the other thing I found was this article by Valerie that was in the newspaper after Toni leaves Atlanta and is living in Philadelphia and beginning to do work at the Scribe Video Center, which you'll be hearing more about from Louis Massiah. And she's talking about the fact that Toni, leaves Atlanta, hits the ground running in Philadelphia with the making of the film, The Bombing of Osage Avenue, which is a documentary regarding the tragedy centering around the police brutality and the killing of people in the MOVE community. But she also, in this article, quotes Toni, the Salt Eaters, and the sense of optimism is the quote that she chooses. And I think the title of my book, A Joyful Revolt, is that in the midst of the work, in the midst of the energy that she's expending, she is always exuding this optimism, and almost reminds me of I live in Hampton now, and so I've been paying a lot of attention to 1619 and Harriet Tubman, this kind of fearlessness, right? Like, independent cultural work, we can do this work, but what holds us back is the fear within. And that's the quote that Valerie chooses to highlight in this article. I think the next slide is the last slide. So Toni Cade leaves Atlanta, but Toni doesn't leave any space. Toni is present in spaces. She comes back to Atlanta. She, returns. She travels back to Cuba in her last 10 years. She loved to fly. I mean, she would, work in London with the feminist group there, connecting wherever she was. If she was giving a talk, she would always try to find a space to meet with the women of color after the talk ends, no matter where she is. And Toni was always making these interconnections, right? And I think when I was first invited, and I'm going to close with this, when I was first invited to be a part of this panel, I was kind of surprised about the idea of lost Southern voices, because when I was working on the book, Savoring the Salt with Cheryl Wall, which we did, it took us years because there were so many people who knew Toni, who had testimony about Toni's impact on their life, as I have testimony about Toni's impact on my life. But as I thought about it, what I want to commend the Georgia, this organization, this group, the Georgia Writers, for today, and for Valerie, for saying, you know, those of us who have had our pictures of Toni hanging on our walls and gather in our groups, that it is time to take that Toni energy into the world, telling the Toni story, but also using the Toni story to continue to fuel the movements, the cultural work, the activism, and yes, the writing. Okay, thank you. I think that's it.
Linda, that was amazing. Made us emotional, but it also made me know that there is not another human being in this world like Toni Cade Bambara. There just simply isn't. And just in that short amount of time, you captured that. One person asked what you can do later about the address on Simpson Road, which maybe if you know, we can share. So thank you very much. Let me quickly move to Louis Massiah. My favorite Louis documentary filmmaker, American documentary filmmaker. He's a MacArthur Prize winner, a community activist, and founder and executive director of the Scribe Video Center, which is a media arts center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which provides workshops for community groups and also emerging artists. Louis also had a long and close friendship and comradeship with Toni Cade Bambara. His films include The Bombing of Osage Avenue, 1986, and W.E.B. Du Bois, A Biography in Four Voices, 1996. He is completing a film on Toni Cade Bambara, which all of us are awaiting, which he will discuss a little bit later, entitled The School of Toni Cade Bambara. Did I get the title right? The Organizing School?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The TCB school, yeah.
TCB school.
Right.
So welcome, Louis, to this panel.
Right. Thanks so much, Beverly. I'm honored anytime I get to spend time with both Beverly and Linda. Beverly has really been the intellectual artifact movement keeper of Toni Cade Bambara's legacy through her work at Spelman and the Women's Resource and Research Center. And really, the annual conference or the biannual conference that's been going on has been such a catalyst. I run into women, you know, in all parts of the world, and they said, "Yeah, I went to Spelman, and I was part of that." And it reverberates, and it goes through the universe. And Linda Holmes, yes, a student of Toni Cade Bambara, but also this extraordinary biographer and researcher that has in many ways inspired other scholars. I've talked to a number of other scholars saying, I'm working on my Toni Cade Bambara biography, and sort of like building off, you know, the extraordinary work that Linda has done. So I'm really honored to be here with both of you. In the documentary, and you're not going to see this part, Toni Morrison says something that I think is breathtaking. She says, Toni Cade Bambara was the finest, and I mean the finest fiction writer that I have ever known. Toni Morrison does not give compliments that easily, but this is someone who edited all of Toni's work, as Linda said, you know, after The Black Woman. And to say that, and when you look at the catalog of works that Toni Morrison has edited, not even to mention her own work, to say that really is pretty extraordinary. And I, as a filmmaker, know how much influence Toni has had on Black independent cinema, on feminist cinema, on world cinema, as a maker, as a film studies writer, as someone who spoke and organized and kind of gathered people in the cinema world. So it has had an extraordinary influence. I am going to do a roll call, but and the roll call is one of Toni Cade Bambara's sort of signature devices, where you sort of name names of works and of people. But before I do it, I wanted to say that I really think that one of the powers of Toni Cade Bambara that you very much hear in Linda's presentation is Toni as an educator, and this idea of sharing knowledge, and sharing knowledge is really being a fundamental part of cultural work and a fundamental part of community building, and really understanding that Toni's role as an educator in many ways is one of the most long-lasting and continuing and ongoing and generative. I mean, certainly, you see it with what Beverly's done with the seminar. So really understanding and the methodologies, really understanding the power of education, which in some ways we kind of separate, but as opposed to seeing it as being absolutely fundamental for us to kind of get to the next level. But before I do want to do the roll call, and Linda did it earlier. So, and this is so that you can continue to buy the books and read the books if you haven't. So The Black Woman, we know, is the first. Tales and Stories of Black Folk, which Linda collaborated and contributed to. Gorilla My Love, The Seabirds Are Still Alive, The Salt Eaters, Deep Sightings and Rescue Missions, which is a series of essays and stories that Toni Morrison gathered and published, but written by Toni. Those Bones Are Not My Child, Toni's book that Morrison completed. And also a very, very important kind of monograph that Makiba Levon and Connor Thomas Reed put together called Realizing the Dreams of a Black University. Again, sort of referencing what Linda talked about. This is a series of essays and writings, some taken from the Spelman Archive, unpublished writing, and some from City University, where Toni taught in the late 1960s. And then the filmography that I know of, and there are other films that will show up, but certainly Bombing of Osage Avenue, which was initially called Burning of Osage, Cecil B. Moore, W.E.B. Du Bois, A Biography in Four Voices, 7 Songs for Malcolm, which was a film made by John Acumbra, which Toni played a really pivotal role in writing. Anna Russell Jones, a film by Nadine Patterson. Brincando El Charco by Francis Negron Montaner. And then there are adaptations of The Johnson Girls and My Man Bovine, I never know how you pronounce it, that are out there. So there is a filmography in the world, but I wanted to talk about Toni in Atlanta, because that's really what I'm going to show. So we've been working on this film, the TCB School of Organizing, which really looks at the many lessons, the life lessons. So people sort of talking about their interactions and their either work with Toni or their being students of Toni, but really things learned from just interacting with Toni. And in some ways it becomes maybe like a textbook for this Black university that Toni was sort of bubbling up and helping us to create. And so it's a series of interviews, a lot of, and as well as archival materials and other materials that we've created, looking, drawn from Toni's life. I should also say, we keep referencing Valerie Boyd. It's not insignificant. Valerie Boyd was there very much from the beginning, and in the meetings with Karma Benet-Smith, Toni's daughter, Valerie Boyd was there, and Valerie Boyd would kind of meet with us in her sage, quiet way, would ask those questions, would say, oh yeah, we need to worry about that. But she'd always raise the questions in such a gentle way. I also first came to Atlanta because of Toni, and a lot later than meeting Toni, a lot later than Linda. It was for Toni's 50th birthday that I first came to Atlanta. We were showing The Bombing of Osage Avenue, and it was also Toni's 50th birthday. And Valerie Boyd, who was then it feels like she was a teenager, but she was already working at the Atlanta Journal and Constitution at that time. She was my guide, and so while Toni was doing a lot of other things, Valerie sort of showed me around Atlanta, introduced me to folks, filmmakers that Toni had made a list of people that I needed to meet, people like AJ and Julie Dash was there, and so just it was a very, very important time. So anyway, but Valerie Boyd was very much at the beginnings of this film. And I realized I'm going to go over time, so I'm just going to show this.
You can go over time, no problem.
All right. So, but just a couple of things. So this piece has been done with kindness and love and support by other faces you're seeing on the screen. Monica Enriquez, an extraordinary editor, has been working with me and sort of putting materials together. Monica edited the W.E.B. Du Bois film that Toni and I worked on with Amiri Baraka, Tulani Davis, and Wesley Brown. And Wesley, who's now in Georgia, I hope you folks get a chance to meet him. Just a wonderful, now a wonderful Georgia writer. So Monica has been helping me edit this film, and Karma has really been the associate producer and really been very, very key in sort of helping us put these together. You'll actually there's a clapboard in this. Those are Karma's hands. So you're not going to see Karma's face, but you'll see Karma's hands in this. And I also, just because of this panel. There's a little bit of mention of a collective that Toni really helped form, which was the Southern Collective of African American Writers, SCAW, that Alice Lovelace really played a kind of pivotal role in, and there will be more of that in the final version. But that said, let's just look. I'm hoping our technology behaves. I'm going to play this from my screen. And I hope it works. Okay. So anyway, thanks for taking a look. So we're definitely early in, but wanted to
necessary. I mean, Louis, that is just amazing.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm sure the audience is thrilled.
Thanks for watching.
So should we ask you when are you going to be finished?
Well, I actually had planned to finish today on Toni's birthday, but we have more shooting.
But close.
By the end of this year,
okay.
Knocking on some wood.
That's fine. Let me just say one thing before I open up. On April 15th, we're having our Toni Cade Bambara conference on Zoom, and you should go to the Spelman website and be aware of it. And we're also celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Women's Center. So April 15th. Wow. So anyway, so we are opened up. We have 10 minutes for Q&A, and I'm gonna go on here. I don't see any open questions. So oh, I see Aisha Simmons there. Hi, Aisha. So anyway, how can we handle? I don't see any open questions.
I don't see any either right now. But if anybody has any, feel free to type them into the Q&A real quick, and we can get those addressed. Scrolling up the chat just to make sure, but I don't see any. There's a wonderful comments in the chat. Everyone's enjoying the panel and saying it's amazing.
It was amazing.
I don't see any questions though. There's a lot of compliments.
Linda, do you know the address on Simpson Road? Do you know?
Yeah, I posted it. 991 Simpson Street.
Okay.
And you mentioned Aisha, and I just again thinking about folks that are continuing to do work to keep Toni Cade Bambara present in the world. And I took a workshop with Aisha a few months ago where she was focusing on Buddhism in the Black feminist community and integrating the works of Black writers. And Toni Cade Bambara was one of the writers that she focused on. And so, you know, I think it's important to remember that that now I think our work is that those of us who do Toni personally, that now I think that that's why Louis' work is so important. It's really going to kind of bring the world into this understanding of how phenomenal Toni is. I can think of her that way.
Louis, if I don't see a question, oh, there's a question, but I wanted to ask you, I want you to, you were a friend, and say something about the last years of her life, if you don't mind.
So Toni moved to Philadelphia in 1985, and I met her on March 23rd of 1986, and soon after that had asked her to work with me on what became the bombing of Osage Avenue. Toni, while in Philadelphia, was definitely organizing in a lot of different areas, working with women veterans, continuing her prison work, certainly speaking and writing all over. But also she was teaching at Scribe pretty much for those 10 years, from 1986, literally until shortly before her death in 1995. I remember when she was actually quite sick in, it would have been the summer of 1995, and she had a workshop scheduled. And I had reached out to another writer because I'm thinking, Toni really, she wasn't well. And Toni said, if I will tell you when I cannot teach. Don't you dare, bring in someone else to teach my workshop. You got it. No, and she taught it, and there's some works that have been produced as a result of that workshop. So Toni, I remember seeing Toni literally the day that she passed, and she said to me, "Louis, I have work to do, delicious work to do," and those are the last words that stay with me. So she. Her influence, I mean, Aisha Simmons, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, so many people out there in the world are really carrying on with Toni. I'm working now on this film with a young activist who, I don't know if she's 30 yet. Her name is Helen Pena, who's so immersed in Toni's work. And has been helping me with the Toni Cade Bambara film. So the legacy is there, and I mentioned that the two scholars from City College. I mean, she's present.
Yeah. Let me mention Mbahati Kaumba too at Spelman, because she's the one that does the work with students with the Toni Cade Bambara conference, and I'm not sure if she had not come to Spelman that Toni Cade would have had that kind of impact. I want to mention just one thing that I remember near the end at the Black Arts Festival, where Toni was on a panel. I will never forget this. And one of the things that she said was that one advantage of her illness was that she got a chance to hear what people, how much people loved her, because they said it over and over again at the Black Arts Festival. And that just, I mean, I'm getting cheer bumps even now that she was able to say that, knowing, what her situation was.
And Beverly, to add to that, I think the 50th celebration at Spelman of her birthday was deeply moving and meaningful.
Yes.
For her.
Yes. Was there one question? I can't wait. We have just a few more minutes. If I don't see any, someone is asking, where should readers begin with Toni Cade? Where would you begin? That's always hard. What would you say, Linda?
Oh my goodness, that's. I was going to leave that one for you, the scholar. I mean, I think to think about.
Well, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say the Black Woman. I'm going to say start with her 1970 book, The Black Woman. But that's my bias.
And I'm remembering the children at this letters from the children, the third, fourth grade, I think maybe junior high school children who got so much out of some of the stories in Gorilla, My Love.
Yeah.
You know, kind of going in order of the books. I think that's what's interesting about her work, because it's the books are very different, right?
Yeah.
And I think the audiences, or who, you know, what people get from her work can be very different in terms of where to begin.
What would you say, Louis?
You know, and I actually think, although it may be difficult to get, but I actually think that the monograph that Makiba and Connor did, Realizing the Dream of the Black University, I think it's inspiring in many ways, and I really wish that it has had broader distribution. I also think the stories in the Seabirds, I think, are instructive for organizers. They deal with, in some ways, how do we deal with this pessimism? How do we deal with this crashing down on us? And how do we keep that optimism and keep that energy to go forward? So I think you can't go wrong with it. And then the Salt Eaters, come on.
Yeah, right.
Well, read all of them. We just have a few more minutes. The panel, the audience is just, you know, really spewing out amazing comments, and I'll just have to say, this is one of the best hours and 15 minutes I have spent in one place in a long time. And I just want to thank Linda and Louis and Joe. You might want to come back and do whatever you do at the end in terms of the project. And so we'll turn it back to you, and thank you all again, and thank Valerie, who's hearing us. Thank Valerie for putting us together.
Very much.
Thanks.
Well, once again, thank you, Louis, thank you, Linda, and thank you, Beverly, for taking on this job in Valerie's honor. We are very, very pleased that you were able to do so. It has truly been a joy. I have to say, Those Bones Were Not My Child was put on the list of books all Georgians should read back in 2015. And back in the day when I was trying to contact people, I was never, ever able to get a good contact. But thanks to today and technology, I've been talking with Karma and Zoe, and that gorgeous trophy will finally be able to go to her family. So thank you all once again so very much for sharing this afternoon with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 and 4 p.m. for our John Oliver Killens panel and for our Orly Airfield panel as well. Thank you again so much for this enlightening and joyous conversation. We hope to see you all again very, very soon. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.